Okay. Hello. My name is Liz, and today I will be talking about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. This is my presentation for my genetic disorder project, and before I begin talking really deeply about this disorder, I do want to give a general overview on what that was. So, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, otherwise known as EDS, is known as a disorder known for affecting the skin, joints, and blood vessels, and because of this, it causes very abnormal elasticity and flexibility in the connective tissue, which is found virtually in every organ system. So this can affect just about everything, which is not normally a problem in most people. So that's why this is considered a disorder. Now, I'm just going to begin with the genetic basis. So this is a mutation-based disorder. It is caused by a gene mutation, which causes a permanent alteration in the DNA sequence that makes up the gene. It can occur in several different genes, including the ones that I have listed here. The examples that I've given are type 1 collagen, alpha 1 chain, the type 1 collagen with the alpha 2 chain, type 5 collagen with the alpha 1 chain, and so on. So the list goes on. There are several genes that can be affected by this mutation. So those are the ones that I listed here. But I did want to point out that there are cases where the underlying genetic cause can be unknown. So as you can see by the examples I've listed below, the collagen protein is what is affected. The location of collagen really depends on what type is being mentioned, but those are the ones that I've listed. So some of the locations where these types can be found, I'm going to begin with type 1 collagen. It is the most abundant type of collagen. As I mentioned previously, it is found in connective tissues, which is almost in every organ system, but it's just found generally in the skin, the tendons, and the bone tissue. And then type 5 collagen is found in the bone matrix, corneal stroma, the intestinal matrix of muscles, livers, lungs, and the placenta. And that was just to list a few, but there are 16 types of collagen, so it can be found in a lot of different places, but that was just to give some examples. Next slide. Thank you. Okay. So what effect does this have on protein expression? Mutations in these genes usually change the structure, the production, the processing of the collagen, and just in general, the way that the proteins interact. That was the protein that I've mentioned with this disorder. And in general, it's supposed to add strength and elasticity to the connective tissue, but because the mutation has changed the structure, production, and interaction in general, it can weaken the connective tissues in the skin, bones, blood vessels, organs, and it just results in all those symptoms that I'm going to list later on about this disorder. Okay, and the big concept, just how does this affect proper cell function? Based on this mutation, it is stopping the collagen protein from being made in what is considered a normal amount. This causes a change in how the protein works and does not allow it to have its normal properties. For instance, collagen is known for the elasticity it brings to skin, but this mutation does not allow the person's skin to display that same kind of elasticity. Now on to the inheritance pattern with this disorder. So depending on the type of EDS, there are 13 types, by the way, but most of them are rare. There's really only 2 main kinds that are the most common when somebody is diagnosed. But it can be inherited from one or both parents, and sometimes it's not even inherited, but it just occurs in that person for the first time. It is considered an autosomal dominant pattern of inheritance, which means that one copy of a mutated gene from one parent can cause the whole genetic condition of a child. and that can give just basically a 50% chance for that child to inherit that mutated gene. This is an example of how you can display this disorder, like how it's passed down. This is called a pedigree. The last slide shows a more simpler version of how the autosomal dominant inheritance works, but this is basically the same thing, but just in a very more complex matter. So it just shows the male unaffected. It just basically gives you a key on how to read that, and this is an example of how you would see how someone is affected and how they're not. Okay, and like I said previously, there's whenever somebody is one of the parents is affected and one isn't, there's basically a 50% chance of inheriting because one parent can pass it down. All right, now on to statistics. So there are 1 in 5,000 individuals that are diagnosed worldwide, but that's just the combined statistic for all 13 types. The statistics can get a little bit more specific between each type, but that was just the general statistic for this disorder. And as I mentioned, there are 13 types, but there's only 2 main that are the most common, and that's hypermobile and classical EDS. And I did notice also that it is most commonly reported in women. So it's mostly diagnosed for them, but it is not. There are like some articles that I read where they don't really consider it a rare disease. It's just rarely diagnosed. So that it was also to consider when I was reading into these statistics as well, and it might not be completely accurate. Some symptoms that I can address. I've listed a couple throughout the presentation, but there is hypermobility, so that just gives you an abnormal range of movement within the joints. So our joints are more strict, but they just have that hypermobility, and because of that, that can cause joint dislocations, which is my next symptom. The muscles around the joints are already weak because of this disorder, which makes the dislocations very easy to occur. Another thing is heart murmur. There were some symptoms included in just the way that the heart can have improper ways of functioning. I didn't really get too deep into my research with this one, but just in general, there are heart issues involved. Another one is easy bruising. So the skin is very fragile since there is a lack of collagen, and basically the structure of the skin is very fragile, and that causes easy bruising. Collagen is also known for the elasticity that it brings to skin, and because they don't have that, it provides an insignificant amount, which leads to wrinkles. And then one of the last symptoms I wanted to address is poor healing. If the person with EDS gets hurt or has a wound, for some reason, they just don't get scar tissue as quickly as somebody with no EDS. And because of that delayed scar tissue formation, they have poor healing, and their wounds can also expand, which makes it even harder to heal in general. Now, for treatments, there is no real cure for EDS, but there are some treatment options to better cope with the symptoms that come with the disorder. There is physical therapy, which can be used to provide muscle stability and strength. So they can go to physical therapists, which can address those complaints of pain and functional limitations, which overall can just address those issues and give you the right exercises to get the strength and stability to be less clumsy, which is known from people diagnosed with EDS because of those symptoms. Another more serious treatment can be surgery. It addresses the same issues, but in a more invasive way. And yeah, that is basically the end of my presentation on just a brief overview of this syndrome, and these are the citations that I used for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.